My dear sisters and brothers from across Africa and the world, it's my real pleasure to be the voice of the African private sector as the president of the Africa Business Council. The Africa Business Council is established in lines with the Heads of State Decision Summit to boost our intra-Africa trade and to fast-track the implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. So our founding vision of the Africa Business Council is a competitive, borderless, innovative Africa for trade, investment, and industrialization. We all know that to realize the AfCFTA, we really need to have certain pillars in order to realize the increase of our intra-Africa trade. And mainly for industrialization, because all of us know that industrialization is our major pillar in order to realize our economic growth. So the Africa Business Council, within its role, have realized our strategy. I call it the triad of empowerment strategy. That will include 3 pillars. The first pillar is private sector strengthening, including SMEs, women, and youth. Private sector actually is the main driver for economic growth, and it contributes more than 90% of the job creation of the continent and 80% of the GDP of our African continent. So private sector strengthening is our real, it is important for human capacity, for creation of jobs. So how do we do this private sector strengthening? And this is one of the main really things with Africa Business Council is mandated and for our economic growth. Our women and youth and SMEs, you know, SMEs is more than 90% of our African private sector. So this will actually be through education, through training, capacity building, raising awareness about our agreements, promoting entrepreneurship and innovation, training our human resources for technology, for e-commerce, training them to realize the digital economy era. It's really about also how we strengthen the skills of using the technology and the machinery. It's about our human capacity. And of course, recognizing this through business development centers, so business incubators. The private sector strengthening is the core for any industrialization on the continent and trade. As Africa Business Council is the premier advocacy arm for the African continent, for an enabling environment for the business development, enabling environment for investment of the private sector. How can we have national trade and industrial policies that favors the African private sector and removes all the barriers with reference to investment of the private sector in industrialization? How can we promote public-private sector partnership, promote financial independence, promote the private sector to be a leader and a player? How can we have these policies for financial inclusion and access to credit and access to finance for the private sector? Is also how we can get incentives for investment for the private sector to invest in infrastructure, in energy, in industrialization. It's actually about the policies that is created by the governments and the policymakers. Our third pillar is about product development, our Made in Africa product. How can we have a competitive product, value-added, standardized, harmonized, quality product made in Africa. If we want to promote the AfCFTA, we really need to have a made in Africa product that is strong and quality and value added and harmonized. So within this, we really need to see how we can harmonize the policies with reference to the regulations and the registrations. How can we have technology parks and promote special economic zones and industrial parks to promote industrialization? How can we really preserve our intellectual property rights? How can we build the capacity of our African industries to make sure of value addition? We need actually to invest in our African transformation with reference to exporting raw materials. We need to export value-added material. We need to substitute the import. How can we really substitute the imports? By increasing our middle class and by promoting our private sector development, because there is a strong relation between the size of the middle class and the private sector development. The middle class actually is when it grows, it promotes the private sector through the investment, the increased investment, the increasing purchasing power, the increasing productivity. There is a huge correlation between the size of middle class and the private sector. So we need really to promote the growth of our middle class and to develop our private sector. And this can never be done alone. Our Africa Business Council, as the voice of the African private sector, is collaborating with our institutions, international and regional institutions. And in this respect, we really want to thank the Office of the Special Advisor on Africa, my dear sister Christine, for her efforts for promoting the Africa Serious Dialogue with reference to industrialization and growing the middle class. Also, the AfCFTA Secretariat and my brother S.G. Wamakilimini and African Union, the Trade and Industry Commission under leadership of His Excellency Ambassador Albert Moshenga, but also UNIDO. UNIDO is our organization for the industrialization development and is a strategic partner to see how can we in Africa have all the stakeholders come together to promote the industrialization agenda, our AIDA, Africa Industrialization Development in Africa. So in doing that, there is certain pillars and certain products that we have to work on and policies that we need to realize. And this will really include, I call them the 10 pins, the 10 ins. So it's indigenous capacity building for our African private sector, for our small medium enterprise, for women and youth entrepreneurs. It's the internal policy reforms with reference to the trade and industrial policies, how to have incentives for the industrialization, how to have investment facilities, how to have actually increased productivity and high productivity and moving to the high productivity sectors instead of the low productivity sector. It's about information communication technology. It's about innovation and scientific research and technology. Without scientific research technology, and there is no development. So we have to invest in scientific research and technology. We have actually to also to promote investment and access to credit and financing for the private sector. We need to have intellectual property rights preservation. We need to have intergenerational dialogue with our youth, having our youth more than 60% are less than 24 25 years, we really also have to have integration and coordination among ourselves as institutes, as private sector, as governments, as regional international organization. So having said that, it's not one institution to promote our industrialization, but it's all of us coming together to promote our intra-Africa trade, to realize our AfCFTA, to industrialize our continent, to have a made in Africa product that is really competitive. So in value addition, we need to see how we can promote the sectors that, and in doing that, Africa Business Council has several projects that we are doing with reference to promoting industrialization and value addition in the continent, and that will include business development centers and business incubators that we are trying to set up within the whole of Africa, the mineral development sector, which we are trying also to put training centers for the value addition for our minerals. For the youth, we are having a big program called Hunting for Africa's Unicorns, which is about the startups and promoting the startups of our African youth to into high tech, into agri-tech, fintech, health tech, agriculture tech, several e-commerce, digital economy. So it's an ongoing program for Africa's Hunting for Africa's Unicorns. For women entrepreneurs, we have several programs for women economic empowerment and financial inclusion for women, and really promoting women in industrialization and processing and manufacturing. Africa Business Council is your council across the continent to promote the realization of our Africa Continental Free Trade Area, but our real dream of our Africa 2063 development agenda, a prosperous, peaceful, integrated Africa driven by the citizens of Africa. And we are the citizens of Africa. So we need to come together to promote our agenda, to realize our dream of our African founding fathers, to have a prosperous, integrated Africa. And Africa Business Council, as the voice of your voice of the African private sector, is there, under which we have developed 20 clusters to meet the expertise. And with those clusters, we have energy, investment, infrastructure, fashion industry, creative industry, green economy, blue economy, education, industry, financial services, healthcare, and medical services, which is huge in our continent. We have also ICT and digital economy, infrastructure, mineral development resources, investment cluster, SMEs, business development cluster, tourism and hospitality industry, trade, transport and logistics, women entrepreneurs, youth entrepreneurs, SMEs. So those clusters, each one is headed by a private sector entity within the continent. And the unique part of Africa Business Council is that's inclusive of the whole private sector, whether REX business councils, like COMESA Business Council, SADC Business Council, or chambers of commerce, like East Africa Chamber of Commerce, West Africa Chamber of Commerce, Pan-African Chamber of Commerce, A-Trade Group. It's really about the inclusive membership of our private sector across the continent, including SMEs, women, youth, big corporates of the continent. So the inclusive membership of Africa Business Council give it the real wide voice of the private sector across the continent, including chambers of commerce, private sector federations, union of industries, manufacturers associations, SMEs, women, youth. It is really, as Africa Business Council, we are supporting all the initiative on the ground, and we are joining hands with our other other institutions, and of course we are as we are established by the Heads of State Decision Summit with African Union. We are have the premier proxy arm for advocating with the heads of states, and our mission is to realize the growth of the GDP and to realize the real industrialization and value addition for our African continent in several sectors, whether into automotive industry, into agriculture, agro-processing, pharmaceutical industries, and many of the high sectors. Actually, the most important is to transform our economy and the productivity of low and our productivity from low sectors to high sectors, and value add. We have all the resources of the world. We have the human resources, 1.3 billion people. We have the natural resources that makes Africa the most richest continent in the world. So realizing our dream, we come together for our real industrialization and realizing our Africa Continental Free Trade Area and the Africa we want.